4 black feathered arrows. That is exactly what it took to bring the most powerful alpha in the north to his knees. It wasn't a rival pack or a rogue army that broke Caleb Marshall. It was the sight of his invisible nanny bleeding out over his son in the snow. Most wolves die after one hit of wolfsbane. Isla took 4. But the true horror didn't start at the ambush site. It started 3 hours later in the ICU, when a routine blood test revealed a secret so devastating it made the Alpha King wish he had died in that car instead of her. This is the story of the Silver Creek Massacre and the woman who loved a king from the shadows. To understand why the events of that Tuesday changed the history of the Northern Packs forever, you have to understand the hierarchy of the Silver Creek Pack. It was a cold, militaristic society run by Alpha Caleb Marshall. Caleb was 32, a man carved out of granite and grief. 3 years prior, he had lost his Luna during childbirth. Since then, he had turned his heart into a fortress. He ran the pack like a corporation, focusing solely on territory, wealth, and defense. His son Leo, now 4 years old, was the heir to the kingdom, yet he barely saw his father. Caleb couldn't look at the boy without seeing his dead wife, so he delegated the raising of the child to the pack's staff. Enter Isla Moore. Isla was 23. In the directory of the pack, she was listed simply as Grade D, domestic staff. She was an Omega, the lowest of the low. She had no powerful family backing her. Her parents were rogue defectors who had died when she was a teen, leaving her indebted to the pack. To pay off her parents' debt, she worked. She scrubbed floors, she cooked, and eventually, she became the nanny. Most of the pack members, especially the high-ranking elites, treated Isla like furniture. She was there, but she wasn't seen. She was quiet. Martha Higgins, the head of the kitchen staff, would later tell investigators, too quiet. She kept her head down. She knew that if she made eye contact with the high-ranking wolves, she'd get snarled at. But she loved that little boy. God, she loved Leo like he was her own flesh and blood. The tension in the pack house began to curdle in late October. The Council of Elders had been pressuring Caleb to remarry. The pack needed a Luna. The leading candidate was Serafina Blaze, the daughter of a neighboring alpha. Serafina was everything Isla was not: tall, blonde, viciously beautiful, and obsessed with status. She spent her weekends at the Silver Creek Manor, trying to seduce Caleb. Caleb, for his part, seemed indifferent, treating the arrangement as a business merger. The problem was Leo. Serafina hated the child. Servants later reported hearing Serafina on the phone with her mother, saying, "Once I get the ring, the brat goes to boarding school in Switzerland. I'm not raising another woman's mistake." One afternoon, 3 days before the incident, a pivotal moment occurred in the pack's sunroom. It was an incident that was hushed up at the time but explains everything that followed. Leo was playing with a set of wooden blocks. Isla was in the corner, folding laundry. Serafina walked in, wearing jagged stilettos, drinking red wine. She was already agitated because Caleb had ignored her at lunch. As she swept past Leo, she accidentally kicked his tower of blocks. Leo, being 4, started to cry. "Oh, shut up," Serafina snapped, her wolf surfacing in her eyes. "Stop whining, you weak little runt." She raised a hand as if to slap the boy. Before her hand could make contact, Isla was there. Witnesses say it happened in a blur. The quiet, invisible Omega caught Serafina's wrist mid-air. "Don't," Isla said. Her voice wasn't shaking. Serafina looked at Isla as if a chair had just started speaking to her. "Excuse me? You filthy little Omega. Do you know who I am? I am your future Luna." "You're not Luna yet," Isla said, releasing her wrist and scooping Leo up into her arms. "And until you are, you don't touch him." Serafina was apoplectic. She stormed to Caleb's office, demanding Isla be fired and exiled. But Caleb Marshall was a pragmatist. He knew Leo screamed for Isla every night. He knew Isla was the only one who could get the boy to eat vegetables. "She stays," Caleb told Serafina, not even looking up from his paperwork. "The boy needs her." "She disrespected me, Caleb." "She's a servant, Serafina. She's irrelevant. Don't let an Omega get under your skin." Irrelevant. That was the word he used. Caleb Marshall truly believed that Isla Moore was just a utility, a line item on a budget. He didn't know that every night, when he walked past the nursery, Isla was the one singing the lullabies he was too afraid to sing. He didn't know that she smelled like vanilla and rain, a scent that, had he ever bothered to get close enough, might have triggered something primal in him. He remained distant, cold. Then came the peace summit in Blackwood. It was a mandatory gathering of the 5 regional alphas. Caleb had to go. Usually, he left Leo behind at the secure pack house. But this time, the summit included a legacy ceremony, where heirs were expected to be presented. Caleb ordered the convoy prepared. 3 black SUVs, armored, bulletproof glass. Isla will come to manage the boy. Caleb ordered his beta, Elias Thorne. Put them in the second car. I'll take the lead vehicle. Sir? Elias hesitated. Intelligence suggests there's rogue activity near the pass. Maybe we should leave the boy. We are Silver Creek, Caleb growled. We don't hide from rogues. Double the guard. On the morning of the departure, Isla had a bad feeling. According to the pack logs, she visited the infirmary at 5 a.m. and asked for an extra first aid kit, specifically requesting wolfsbane coagulants. It was as if she knew. As she strapped Leo into his car seat in the middle SUV, she looked up and saw Caleb standing on the porch, adjusting his cufflinks. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. Caleb looked away, checking his watch. Isla didn't. She stared at him with a look of profound sadness. Serafina insisted on coming, forcing herself into the lead car with Caleb. Let's get this over with, Caleb said into his comms. The convoy rolled out of the iron gates of Silver Creek at 8 a.m. By 9:15 a.m., they entered the dense canopy of Blackwood Forest. The trap was already set. The road through Blackwood Forest was narrow, winding through ancient pines that blotted out the sun. It was snowing lightly, a wet, heavy snow that muffled sound. Inside the second SUV, the atmosphere was calm. Isla was reading a storybook to Leo. The driver, a warrior named Jax, was scanning the mirrors. Boss is driving fast today, Jax muttered, struggling to keep up with Caleb's lead vehicle. He just wants to get there, Isla said softly, stroking Leo's hair. He hates these things. At mile marker 82, the road dipped into a ravine. It was the perfect kill box. The first sign of trouble wasn't a sound, but a loss of control. The lead SUV, Caleb's vehicle, suddenly swerved violently. A massive tree trunk had been swung down from the canopy on ropes, a medieval battering ram. It smashed into the hood of Caleb's car, crumpling the engine block and spinning the armored vehicle into the ditch. Ambush! Jack screamed into the radio. Alpha is down! I repeat, Alpha is down! Chaos erupted. From the tree line, figures emerged. They weren't just feral rogues. They were mercenaries. They wore tactical gear and carried compound bows. These weren't random attacks. This was an assassination attempt. Reverse! Isla shouted, her instincts flaring. Jack slammed the car into reverse, but an explosion rocked the rear of the vehicle. A neatly placed IED took out the back tires and the axle. The SUV shuddered and slammed into the guardrail, teetering over the edge of a steep drop. Glass shattered. Smoke filled the cabin. Leo! Isla unbuckled herself, her ears ringing. The boy was screaming, hanging sideways in his car seat. Jax, the warrior, was slumped over the steering wheel, a piece of shrapnel in his neck. He was gone. Get down, Isla gasped, crawling over the center console to reach the back. Outside, the gunfire was deafening. The mercenaries were suppressing the third car, the rear guard, keeping them pinned down. Their target was clearly the lead car in the air. Isla managed to unclick Leo's 5-point harness. The car was a death trap. If they stayed inside, they'd be sitting ducks. If the car tipped over the rail, they'd fall 300 feet into the river. Isla, I'm scared, Leo sobbed. I know, baby, I know. I need you to be brave, like a king. Can you do that? Her hands were trembling, but her voice was steady. She kicked the rear door open. The cold air rushed in, smelling of sulfur and wet pine. Isla dragged Leo out onto the asphalt. She looked toward the front. Caleb had kicked his door off its hinges. He had shifted a massive midnight black wolf, tearing through the mercenaries with terrifying ferocity. But there were too many of them. They were using nets and tranquilizer darts laced with high-grade wolfsbane. Serafina was nowhere to be seen. She was likely cowering in the floorboard of the lead car. Then, Isla saw him. A sniper. Not with a gun, but with a high-tension crossbow. He was perched on a ridge, not aiming at Caleb. He was aiming at the small, crying boy in Isla's arms. The mercenary signaled. The backup shooters emerged from the brush on the right side of the road. Leo, run to your dad, Isla screamed, pushing the boy toward the front of the convoy where Caleb's wolf was fighting. But Leo froze. The noise was too much. 3 archers drew back their strings. The tips of the arrows glistened with a sickly green liquid. concentrated wolfsbane, enough to kill a shifter in minutes. Isla didn't think. She didn't calculate. She didn't have a warrior's speed or an alpha's strength. She only had her body. She tackled Leo, spinning him around and curling her body over his small frame, creating a human cocoon. She pressed his face into the snow, covering his head with her hands, exposing her entire back to the ridge. Twack! The sound was wet and sickening. Isla gasped, her back arching, but she didn't let go. The first arrow hit her right shoulder. Thwack! The second arrow buried itself lower, near her ribs. Thwack! The third hit her thigh, pinning her to the ground. Thwack! The fourth, the kill shot, struck her directly in the center of her spine, just between the shoulder blades. The pain was a white-hot supernova. It was so intense that her vision instantly went black, then red. She couldn't breathe. Her lungs felt like they were filled with broken glass, but she could feel Leo underneath her, squirming, alive. He's safe, she thought. He's safe. A roar shook the forest. It wasn't the roar of a wolf in battle. It was the sound of a creature whose soul was being ripped out. Caleb had finished the last of the immediate attackers. He turned just in time to see the arrows fly. He saw the woman, the irrelevant domestic servant, throw herself over his son. He saw her body jerk violently with each impact. The Alpha King didn't just run. He blurred. He covered the 50 yards in a heartbeat, his jaws snapping the neck of the nearest archer, before shifting back into human form in a slide of snow and blood. "Leo!" Caleb screamed, dropping to his knees. He reached for Isla. She was heavy, dead weight. Her gray staff uniform was soaked crimson. The snow around them was turning a horrific shade of pink. "Daddy!" Leo scrambled out from beneath Isla's body. The boy was covered in blood, but none of it was his. "Isla won't wake up. Daddy, she won't wake up." Caleb's hands hovered over her. He was a warrior. He had seen death 1,000 times. He knew what 4 arrows to the back meant. He knew what that green sheen on the arrowheads meant. He grabbed Isla's shoulder to turn her over, but stopped. The arrows were deep. Moving her might kill her, but he had to check her airway. "Elias!" Caleb roared, his voice cracking. "Get the medic! Now!" He carefully tilted her head back. Isla's face was pale, almost translucent. Her lips were blue, but her eyes fluttered open. They were unfocused, glassy. She saw Caleb. For the first time in 3 years, the Alpha King was looking at her, really looking at her. He wasn't looking through her. He was looking into her. The boy, Isla wheezed, blood bubbling past her lips. "He's safe," Caleb choked out, pressing his hands against the wound in her shoulder to stanch the flow. "You saved him, Isla. You saved him." "Did. I do." "Good?" she whispered, her voice so faint the wind almost stole it. Caleb felt a tear, hot and foreign, slide down his cheek. He had never cried for anyone but his wife. "Yes, you did good. You did so good." Isla smiled. It was a small, broken thing. "Tell him. I love." Her head lolled to the side. Her chest stopped rising. "Isla?" Caleb shook her gently. "Isla!" The pack doctor, Dr. Richard Halloway, skidded to a halt beside them, dropping his bag. He took one look at the arrows and his face went ashen. "Alpha, move," Halloway commanded, checking for a pulse. "Save her," Caleb growled, his eyes flashing gold, the Alpha command vibrating in the air. "That is an order, Richard. You bring her back." I don't feel a wolf," Halloway stammered, his hands working frantically to stabilize the shafts. "Alpha, her wolf isn't healing her. The wolfsbane, it's too much. She's not healing." And that was the moment the true horror set in. Isla wasn't shifting. She wasn't knitting back together. She was dying like a human. Caleb looked at the arrows. 4 of them. She had taken 4 arrows for a child that wasn't hers, for a king who didn't know her name, in a world that treated her like dirt. As the medics loaded her limp body onto the stretcher, a piece of paper fell out of her pocket. It was a drawing Leo had made. Stick figures. A big wolf, Caleb, a little wolf, Liu, and a girl holding an umbrella over them. Caleb crumbled. He fell forward, his forehead touching the bloody snow, and let out a howl of anguish that silenced the entire forest. But the twist was yet to come. Because back at the hospital, while Isla fought for every heartbeat, Dr. Halloway would run a blood test to check for donor compatibility, and the results would make Caleb wish he had died in that ambush instead. The waiting room of the Silver Creek Pack Hospital was a place usually reserved for broken bones from training accidents or the joyful cries of new mothers. It was not built for the silence that suffocated it now. It was 11:42 a.m. The fluorescent lights hummed with an irritating, flickering buzz that grated against Caleb Marshall's heightened senses. The Alpha King was pacing. He was still covered in the filth of the ambush mud, pine needles, and the drying, coppery crust of blood that belonged to Isla Moore. Every time he turned, his heavy boots squeaked against the polished linoleum, a sound that echoed like a gunshot in the empty corridor. His beta, Elias Thorne, stood by the vending machine, terrified to speak. He had never seen Caleb like this. When Caleb's first wife died, he had been a statue, cold, immovable, silent. But this was different. This was the frantic, caged energy of a predator who had failed to protect the weak. "Sit down, Caleb," Elias whispered, risking his alpha's wrath. "You're scaring the nurses." Caleb stopped and looked at the nurses' station. 2 young Omegas were huddled behind the glass, trembling, their eyes fixed on the blood staining Caleb's shirt. "They should be scared," Caleb rasped, his voice sounding like gravel grinding together. "My son is in a safe room, screaming for a nanny who is currently dying in operating room 3 because my security failed. Because I failed." He looked at his hands. He could still feel the weight of her. She had been so incredibly light. How could someone so small hold so much courage? 4 arrows. He closed his eyes and saw it again on a loop. The way her body jerked, the way she didn't let go of Leo, even when the steel tips shattered her ribs. The double doors at the end of the hall swung open. The silence broke. Dr. Richard Halloway emerged. He was the head of trauma, a man with 40 years of experience healing shifters. He had pulled warriors back from the brink of death after bear attacks and rogue wars. But right now, Richard looked defeated. He pulled his surgical mask down, revealing a face gray with exhaustion. His surgical gown was splattered with red. Caleb didn't walk. He stalked toward the doctor. "Report." Richard took a breath, removing his glasses to rub the bridge of his nose. "She's alive, Alpha." "But barely." "Fix her," Caleb commanded, the gold in his eyes flaring. "Use the Genesis serum. Use the reserve blood. I don't care what it costs." "It's not about cost, Caleb," Richard said, dropping the formalities. His voice was shaking. "We removed the arrows. The physical damage to her lungs and spine is extensive, but repairable for a wolf. The problem isn't the wounds. Then what is it?" "It's the wolfsbane," Richard said. "It was a modified strain. It didn't just poison her blood. It attacked her wolf directly. It's suppressing her healing factor entirely. Her body is fighting like a human's, Caleb. And human bodies aren't meant to survive that kind of trauma." Caleb felt the floor tilt. "So she's dying?" "She is in a coma. We have her on life support. If her wolf doesn't wake up and start fighting the toxin, she will go into multi-organ failure within 24 hours. Caleb ran a hand through his hair, gripping the roots. "Okay. Keep her stable. I'll go in. I'll force my aura on her. I'll make her wolf submit to the healing." "No," Richard said sharply. He stepped in front of the Alpha, blocking his path. "You can't go in there yet. There's something else." Caleb narrowed his eyes. "What?" Richard looked around, ensuring the hallway was empty. He motioned for Elias to step back. This was a conversation for the Alpha alone. "When we ran her blood panel to check for compatibility for a transfusion," Richard began, his voice dropping to a whisper, "we found something. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I ran it 3 times. "Richard, stop speaking in riddles," Caleb growled. "Isla's system is flooded with suppressants. Caleb, heavy-duty, black market scent blockers. She's been taking them every morning, high doses." Caleb frowned. "Why would a domestic Omega take scent blockers? She has no rank to hide." "That's what I asked myself," Richard said. "So I ran a genetic sequence. I wanted to see who her people were, maybe find a relative to notify." The doctor reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled printout. He held it out to Caleb, his hand trembling slightly. "Caleb, she doesn't have a scent because she's been hiding it from you." Caleb snatched the paper. It was a mess of medical jargon, charts, and graphs. He couldn't read it. "Tell me." "The blockers were masking a specific pheromone signature," Richard said, tears welling in his aged eyes. "The markers match yours, Caleb. A 99.9% biological imperative match." The air left the room. Caleb froze. The hum of the lights faded. The smell of the hospital vanished. The only thing he could hear was the pounding of his own heart, slow and heavy, like a war drum. "What are you saying?" Caleb whispered. "She's your fated mate, Caleb." The words hit him harder than the tree trunk that had smashed his car. "That's impossible," Caleb denied, stumbling back. "My mate was Lydia. Lydia died. We are wolves, Caleb." "Second chance mates are rare, but they exist," Richard pressed, his voice full of sorrow. "Isla is your second chance. She has been working in your house, raising your son, washing your clothes, and she has been your mate the entire time." She knew? "She had to know," Richard said. "The blockers, she was taking them to hide the bond. She was suffering through the pain of a rejected bond every single day, voluntarily, just so you wouldn't feel it." Caleb's knees gave out. He slid down the wall, collapsing onto the cold floor. It all made sense. The way Leo calmed down instantly when she was near. The way the house felt colder when she left for her days off. The subtle scent of vanilla and rain that Caleb had assumed was just her shampoo, it was the mate scent. She had been right there. She had watched him mourn his dead wife for 3 years. She had watched him date other women. She had watched Serafina insult her, and she had said nothing. She had swallowed pills to burn away the connection, enduring the physical agony of a suppressed bond, all to let him grieve in peace. She took 4 arrows for me, Caleb thought, horror dawning on him. She didn't just die for her alpha. She died for her mate, who didn't even know she existed. "Oh God," Caleb choked out, covering his face with his blood-stained hands. "What have I done?" The revelation hung over the hospital like a shroud. The news didn't leave the hallway. Caleb ordered absolute silence on the matter, but the weight of it crushed him. Beta Elias sat next to his alpha on the floor. He didn't offer platitudes. There were no words for this kind of tragedy. To reject a mate was a sin. To do it unknowingly, while she served you as a maid, was a torture designed by the devil. She thought she wasn't good enough. Caleb whispered to the floor tiles. "She's an Omega. I'm the Alpha King. She thought I would reject her if I knew. So she rejected herself first. She wanted you to be happy, Caleb," Elias said softly. "She saw how much you loved Lydia. She didn't want to force a bond on you while you were grieving. Happy?" Caleb laughed, a dark, broken sound. "I haven't been happy in 3 years. The only time the house felt like a home was when—" He trailed off. When she was there, the double doors swung open again. But this time, it wasn't a doctor. It was Serafina Blaze. She looked pristine. She had gone back to the pack house, showered, and changed into a designer black dress that was inappropriate for a hospital, too tight, too short. She walked in with the clicking of heels that sounded like nails on a chalkboard. Finally, Serafina sighed, looking around the waiting room with disdain. "I've been waiting in the car for an hour, Caleb. The security won't let me leave the compound. It's ridiculous." Caleb didn't look up. He stayed on the floor, his head in his hands. Serafina marched over, oblivious to the atmosphere. "Caleb, get up. You're the Alpha King, not a beggar. Look at you, you're covered in filth." "And for what? The help?" Elias stood up, his face hardening. "Serafina, now is not the time." "Don't talk to me, Elias," she snapped. She looked down at Caleb. "Caleb, honestly, it's tragic, sure. She was a good nanny, but we have appearances to maintain. The council is asking for a statement. We need to tell them the air is safe, and that the casualty was minor." Minor. Caleb stopped breathing for a second. The beast inside him, the one that had been dormant and depressed for years, woke up. It didn't growl. It didn't bark. It simply opened its eyes and chose violence. Caleb stood up. He rose slowly, unfolding his massive frame until he towered over Serafina. The energy coming off him was so potent that the lights overhead actually flickered and popped. "Casualty?" Caleb asked. His voice was terrifyingly calm. Serafina faltered, stepping back. "Well, yes. She's just a staff member, Caleb. We can hire another one tomorrow. My agency has—" "You kicked Leo's blocks," Caleb said. Serafina blinked, confused by the non sequitur. "What?" "3 days ago, in the sunroom. You kicked my son's blocks. And you tried to slap him. I was stressed. And that girl, she grabbed me. She disrespected your future, Luna." "She is not that girl," Caleb said, stepping closer. Serafina hit the wall. She had nowhere to go. "And you are nothing." "Caleb, baby, you're in shock. she stammered, her scent turning sour with fear. She took 4 arrows, Caleb said, his voice rising, the human facade cracking. She shielded my son with her body. While you... Where were you, Seraphina? When the arrows flew? Where were you? I'm not a warrior. I stayed in the car. You stayed in the car, Caleb repeated. You hid. She died. He leaned in, his face inches from hers. She is my mate. Seraphina's eyes went wide. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The woman you called a servant. The woman you treated like dirt. She is the Luna of this pack. Not you. Never you. That's a lie, Seraphina whispered. Get her out of my sight, Caleb barked, turning his back on her. Elias, revoke her clearance. Throw her out of the territory. If she steps foot within 10 miles of Silver Creek again, I will hunt her down myself. Caleb, you can't do this. My father is. Your father! Caleb roared, spinning around, his eyes fully gold. Should pray I don't burn his lands to ash for raising a coward like you. Go! Elias grabbed Seraphina by the arm none too gently and dragged the screaming woman out of the hospital. Silence returned. But it was a heavy, angry silence now. Alpha? Caleb turned. A small, timid voice came from the hallway entrance. It was Leo. The 4-year-old was holding the hand of a trembling nurse. He was still wearing his blood-stained t-shirt, clutching a stuffed rabbit that Isla had bought him. His face was streaked with dried tears. Daddy? Leo sniffled. Is Isla waking up yet? Caleb felt his heart shatter into dust. He walked over and fell to his knees, pulling his son into his chest. He buried his face in the boy's messy hair, smelling the lingering scent of vanilla that clung to him Isla's scent. No, Leo, Caleb choked out, rocking the boy. Not yet. She promised to read me the end of the book, Leo cried. She promised. I know. Dr. Holloway stepped out of the trauma ward again. He looked grave. Caleb, the doctor said softly, we've stabilized her for now. You can see her, but you need to prepare yourself. It's not good. Caleb picked up Leo. We're going in. Alpha, the boy shouldn't see. He needs to be there, Caleb said firmly. She needs him. She loves him more than she loves her own life. Maybe she'll sense him. They walked into the ICU. Room 304 was cold. The only light came from the blinking monitors. In the center of the room, surrounded by tubes and wires, lay Isla Moore. She looked small, fragile. Her skin was the color of paper. A ventilator tube was taped to her mouth, forcing air into her damaged lungs. Bandages covered her from neck to waist. Caleb approached the bed as if walking on holy ground. He set Leo down on the chair next to her. Isla? Leo whispered, reaching out to touch her hand. Her fingers were limp and cold. Caleb stood on the other side. He reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair from her forehead. His skin tingled the mate spark. It was there. Faint, weak, buried under layers of trauma and wolfsbane, but it was there. It felt like touching a live wire that had been cut. I'm here, Isla, Caleb whispered, leaning down to her ear. I know everything now. I know you're my mate. I know what you did. The heart monitor beeped. Beep, beep, beep. Slow, too slow. I'm so sorry I didn't see you. He wept, his tears falling onto her cheek. I'm so sorry I let you hide. But you have to come back. You have to wake up and yell at me. You have to wake up and tell me I'm an idiot. Just, please, don't leave me alone again. Suddenly, the rhythm of the monitor changed. Beep, 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 beep. It wasn't speeding up in recovery. It was fluttering. Doctor, Caleb roared. The alarm started blaring. A flat, discordant tone filled the room. B. Code blue. Room 304. Nurses rushed in. Dr. Holloway shoved Caleb back. Get them out! Charge the paddles! She's arresting! No, Isla! Caleb screamed as Elias dragged him and the screaming Leo out of the room. The last thing Caleb saw before the door swung shut was Isla's body jerking violently as the defibrillator slammed electricity into her stopped heart. The Alpha King fell to the floor of the hallway, listening to the sounds of them trying to restart the heart of the woman who had died saving his world. And for the first time in his life, Caleb Marshall prayed. The silence that followed the code blue was worse than the screaming. For 12 minutes, the corridor of the Silver Creek Hospital had been a war zone of shouted orders, the whining charge of defibrillators, and the sickening thud of a body lifting off a mattress under the force of electricity. Now, At 2 a.m., it was quiet. Caleb sat in a plastic chair outside room 304. He hadn't moved in 4 hours. He hadn't washed the dried blood from his hands. He stared at the wall, his eyes burning with a mixture of exhaustion and a rage so deep it felt like it was dissolving his bones. Dr. Richard Halloway stepped out of the room. He looked older than he had that morning. He pulled his surgical cap off, revealing thinning gray hair matted with sweat. "She's back," Richard said, his voice hollow. "We got a rhythm." "But Caleb, it's a phantom rhythm." Caleb didn't look up. "What does that mean?" "It means the machines are breathing for her. Her heart is beating because we're forcing it to with drugs." "But her wolf," Richard sighed, sliding down the wall to sit next to his alpha. "Her wolf has gone dormant, deep dormant. It's the wolf's bane, Caleb. It's severed the connection between her spirit and her body. Without her wolf to heal the spinal damage, she won't wake up. She's fading." Caleb turned his head slowly. "You're saying she's brain dead?" "I'm saying she's soul weary," Richard corrected. "She has spent years suppressing her nature with those pills. She spent years making herself small, invisible. And then she took massive trauma. Her subconscious has decided it's easier to let go than to fight." Caleb stood up. His movements were stiff, like a rusted machine. "She doesn't get to decide that. Caleb, be reasonable. We've done everything medicine can do." "Medicine is for humans," Caleb growled. "We are not human." He walked past the doctor and pushed open the door to room 304. The room was freezing. Wolves ran hot, so the hospital kept trauma rooms cold to prevent fevers. But this felt like a tomb. Isla lay amidst a tangle of tubes. The ventilator hissed, rhythmically hiss, click, hiss, click, a mechanical mockery of life. Caleb walked to the side of the bed. He looked down at the woman he had ignored for 3 years. Her face was swollen from the fluids. Her hair, usually tied back in a severe bun, was loose and spread over the pillow like a halo of dark silk. She looked so young, too young to be dying for a man who hadn't even bothered to learn her favorite color. "Everyone out," Caleb said softly. The 2 nurses checking the IV bags froze. "Alpha, we need to monitor." "Out!" Caleb roared, the sound vibrating the glass of the window. The nurses scrambled, dropping a clipboard in their haste to escape the predator in the room. When the door clicked shut, Caleb was alone with the steady beep of the monitor and the ghost of his mate. He unbuttoned his cuffs and rolled up his sleeves. He looked at the IV line feeding into the crook of Isla's bruised arm. Then, he looked at his own wrist. "You hid from me," Caleb whispered to her unconscious form. "You took pills to dull the bond. You thought you weren't strong enough to be my Luna. You thought I wanted a warrior." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small ceremonial silver knife, a blade every alpha carried for pack rituals. "You were wrong," he said, his voice cracking. "You are the strongest warrior I have ever met, and I am not going to let you die in the dark." Caleb sliced his own wrist. A clean, deep cut. His blood, thick and dark with alpha potency, welled up instantly. He didn't use a transfusion bag. That would take too long, and the plastic would dilute the essence. He did what the old laws dictated, a ritual forbidden by modern medicine, because of the strain it put on the donor. He lifted Isla's limp hand and pressed her wrist against his. He used the knife to make a matching cut on her arm, right over the radial artery. Skin to skin, blood to blood. He pressed the wounds together, binding their arms with a strip of linen he tore from the sheet. "I, Caleb Marshall, Alpha of the Silver Creek Pack, command you to return," he began, the ancient incantation rolling off his tongue in a low growl. He closed his eyes and pushed. He didn't push with his muscles, he pushed with his soul. He forced his aura, his vitality, his very life force, out of his own veins and into hers. It was agony. It felt like he was being drained dry, like siphoning gasoline. He felt the coldness of her body seeping into him, trying to drag him down into the void with her. Beep, beep, beep. The monitor didn't change. "Take it," Caleb snarled, sweat beading on his forehead. "Take it all, Isla. Don't you dare leave me with that boy alone. He needs you. I need you." He felt her blood sluggish and poisoned fighting his. The wolf's bane in her system recoiled at the intrusion of his pure alpha blood. It burned. Caleb gritted his teeth, his knees buckling. He was pouring years of his life into her, weakening himself to a dangerous degree. His vision blurred. The room began to spin. "She's not accepting it," he realized with terror. "She's too far gone." He leaned down, his lips brushing her ear. He needed to give her a reason to fight. Something stronger than duty. something stronger than fear. Isla, he whispered, his voice trembling. Leo is asking for his mother. Not Serafina, not a ghost. You. At the mention of the boy's name, Caleb felt a spark. It was tiny, a flicker in the darkness. But it was there. Her pulse jumped against his wrist. Beep, 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 beep. That's it, Caleb gasped, his legs finally giving out. He slumped over the side of the bed, his arm still bound to hers, his head resting on the mattress near her hip. Fight, Isla. Fight for him. The darkness took Caleb then. He passed out from blood loss and exhaustion, draped over the body of the woman who had saved his son, their blood mixing in a slow crimson pact that would bind them closer than any marriage vow ever could. Time is a strange thing in a hospital. It is measured not in hours, but in shifts, in fluid checks, in the rise and fall of fever charts. 3 days passed. The blizzard outside had buried Silver Creek in 3 feet of snow, mirroring the stillness inside the Alpha's private suite. Caleb had woken up 20 hours after the ritual. He was weak, pale, and ravenously hungry, but he refused to leave the room. He ate the food Elias brought him. He showered in the small ensuite bathroom, and then he returned to his chair. He watched her. The ritual had worked. The color had returned to Isla's cheeks. The wounds on her back had closed, scarred, ugly, and jagged, but closed. Her wolf was awake, metabolizing the poison. The ventilator was gone, replaced by a simple oxygen cannula, but she hadn't opened her eyes. It was Tuesday afternoon when the change happened. Caleb was reading a report on his tablet, something about the interrogation of the surviving mercenary, when he heard a sound. It was a small, whimpering gasp. He dropped the tablet. Isla was moving. Her head turned on the pillow, her brow furrowed in pain. Her hands, resting on the sheets, clenched into fists. Isla? Caleb was at her side in an instant, but he didn't touch her. He was afraid to. She looked so breakable. Her eyelids fluttered. The lashes, dark against her pale skin, lifted slowly. Her eyes were brown, not a remarkable color usually. But to Caleb in that moment, they were the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. They were warm like wet earth in summer, but they were also terrified. Leo! Her voice was a cracked, dry rasp. She tried to sit up, but her body screamed in protest. She gasped, falling back against the pillows, clutching her chest. Easy, easy, Caleb said, hovering his hands over her. Don't move. You've been hurt. Isla blinked, her vision clearing. She focused on the man standing over her. It took her a moment to recognize him. He didn't look like the Alpha King. She knew the man in the tailored suits who walked past her in the hallway without a glance. This man had a 3-day beard. His eyes were red-rimmed. He was wearing a wrinkled t-shirt. He looked wrecked. Alpha, Marshall, she whispered, confusion flooding her scent. It's Caleb, he said. The correction was automatic. Just Caleb. Isla's heart rate spiked on the monitor. Beep, 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 beep. She tried to scramble backward, pushing herself into the pillows. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to. Am I in the VIP wing? I should be in the staff ward. I can't pay for this. The words hit Caleb like physical blows. She wasn't worried about her paralysis or her pain. She was worried about the bill. She was worried about being in a room above her station. Isla, stop, Caleb said, his voice thick with emotion. You are not paying for anything. You are in the Alpha suite because that is where you belong. Leo? She asked again, tears filling her eyes. Is he okay? The arrows. I tried to cover him. Did I miss one? He is perfect, Caleb assured her quickly. Not a scratch on him. He's with Elias. He's been asking for you every hour. Isla let out a long, shuddering breath, her body sagging with relief. Thank the goddess. He's safe. She closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her strength. Then, the reality of her situation seemed to settle in. She looked at Caleb again, her expression shifting from fear to shame. I'm sorry about the car, sir, she murmured, looking down at her hands. And the uniform. I think I ruined it. I'll work extra shifts to replace it once I'm healed. Caleb stared at her. He felt a sudden, violent urge to punch the wall. Not at her, but at the world that had conditioned her to be this way. At himself for creating an environment where she felt this worthless. Isla, Caleb said, pulling the chair close and sitting down so he was at eye level with her. Look at me. She hesitated, then met his gaze. She was trembling. You saved the heir to the pack, Caleb said slowly, enunciating every word. You took 4 arrows meant for my son. You nearly died. Do you really think I care about a uniform? I was just doing my job, sir. No, Caleb said. A job is changing diapers. A job is cooking dinner. Taking a bullet is not a job description for a nanny. He took a breath. He had to tell her. He couldn't keep the secret any longer. Isla, while you were under, we had to do blood work. Isla went still. Absolutely still. The fear returned. Sharper this time. Her scent soured with panic. She knew what was coming. We found the suppressants, Caleb said softly. Isla turned her face away, staring at the window. A single tear tracked through the dust on her cheek. I can explain. We found the match, Caleb continued, ignoring her plea. 99.9%. Silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. I'm fired, aren't I? Isla whispered. Caleb blinked, stunned. What? I broke the law, she said, her voice shaking. I hid a mate bond from an alpha. That's treason. I didn't want to be a burden. I knew you were grieving, Lydia. I knew you didn't want someone like me. She looked back at him, her eyes pleading. Please, Alpha, don't banish me. I have nowhere to go. I won't cause trouble. I'll keep taking the pills. I'll stay in the nursery. You won't even know I'm there. Just let me stay near Leo. Caleb felt his heart rip in half. She was bargaining for her life. She was offering to poison herself, to live in agony, just to be allowed to serve his son. She truly believed that he would reject her. Isla, Caleb said, his voice breaking. He reached out and took her hand. She flinched, trying to pull away, but he held on. His thumb brushed over the bandage on her wrist, the place where their blood had mixed. I'm not firing you, Caleb said. And you are never taking those pills again. Do you hear me? Never. But the bond. I feel it, Caleb admitted. I felt it when I gave you my blood. It's strong, Isla. It's undeniable. You gave me your blood? She looked at the bandage on his wrist, then hers. The realization dawned on her. The blood oath. You were dying, Caleb said. My blood was the only thing that could wake your wolf. Isla stared at him, her mind reeling. The Alpha King had performed a blood oath with a servant? It didn't make sense. Why? She asked. Why would you do that? Because, Caleb said, lifting her hand to his lips. He kissed her knuckles, a gesture of reverence that made Isla's breath hitch. Because I have been a blind fool for 3 years. Because you are the only mother my son has ever known. And because I think I might have spent a lifetime looking for you and didn't realize you were in the next room. Isla looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the guilt, the exhaustion, and something else, something warm and possessive. But Isla Moore was not a fairy tale princess. She was a survivor, and she was tired. She pulled her hand away from his grip. Don't, she whispered. Caleb froze. Don't what? Don't look at me like that, Isla said, her voice gaining a fragile strength. Don't look at me like I'm precious now. You didn't see me yesterday. You didn't see me the day before. You only see me now because I bled for you. Isla, that's not... It is, she cut him off. You feel guilty, Caleb. You feel indebted. That's not the same thing as wanting me. You want the woman who saved your son. You don't want Isla the maid. She turned her head back to the window, closing herself off. I'm tired, Alpha. Please, I just want to sleep. Caleb sat there, his hand empty, the rejection stinging more than any arrow ever could. He realized then that saving her life was the easy part. Earning her trust, that was going to be the war. Rest, Caleb said, standing up slowly. I'll be right outside. I'm not going anywhere. You never are, Isla whispered to the glass. Until you are. Caleb walked out of the room, leaving his heart behind, knowing that the hardest twist of the story wasn't the attack, it was the fact that his mate was alive. But she didn't believe she was loved. And the shadows in the corner of the room, neither of them noticed that the blinds were slightly open, or that a long-range lens from a paparazzi camera had just captured the Alpha King kissing the hand of his nanny. The scandal was about to break, and it would threaten to destroy everything Caleb was trying to rebuild. The photo hit the tabloids at dawn. The headline was brutal. The Alpha and the Maid, scandal in the ICU. By 8 a.m., the Silver Creek Pack House was under siege by reporters. The Council of Elders demanded Caleb's resignation. They argued that an Alpha King could not mate with a servant, especially one with rogue blood in her lineage. They wanted Isla exiled for seducing the leader during a crisis. But Caleb Marshall didn't resign. He didn't hide. At noon, he walked out onto the steps of the hospital. He wasn't wearing a suit. He wore jeans and a black t-shirt, looking every bit the lethal predator he was. He stepped up to the podium, the microphones capturing the low, dangerous growl in his chest. "You want a statement?" Caleb asked, his voice silencing the mob. "Here it is." He didn't talk about politics. He didn't talk about lineage. He talked about the arrows. 4 days ago, my son was targeted for execution, Caleb said, his eyes scanning the crowd. My guards failed. My armor failed. I failed. The only thing standing between my son and a grave was Isla Moore. She didn't have armor. She didn't have a weapon. She had a body, and she gave it freely. He leaned into the mic. You call her a servant. You call her unworthy. But while you were writing headlines, she was bleeding out on a frozen road for a child that wasn't hers. She is not a maid. She is the only person in this pack with the heart of a queen. He ripped the resignation papers the council had sent him in half. Isla Moore is my mate. She is the Luna of Silver Creek. And if anyone, council, elder, or wolf has a problem with that, they can challenge me for the title right now. I'll be waiting. Silence. Absolute, terrified silence. No one challenged the Alpha King. Up in room 304, Isla watched the broadcast on the small TV. She was crying, not out of fear, but because for the first time in her life, someone was fighting for her. When Caleb returned to the room, the air was different. The hesitation was gone. You challenged the council, Isla whispered, wiping her eyes. For me, I would burn the council for you, Caleb said, closing the door. He walked to the bed, but this time, he didn't sit in the chair. He sat on the edge of the mattress, careful of her injuries. Isla, you said I only see you because of the guilt, he said softly. But that's not true. I see you because you're the one who sings the moon's lullaby to Leo when he has nightmares. I see you because you put cinnamon in the coffee, even though I never asked, because you knew I liked it. I see you because you were the light in my house when I was too busy staring at the dark. He reached into his pocket. It wasn't a ring, it was too soon for that. It was a small, wooden wolf carving, one of Leo's toys. Leo gave me this. Caleb smiled crookedly. He said, "Give this to Mommy so she comes home." Isla broke. The sob that escaped her was raw. He called me Mommy? He's been calling you that in his sleep for a year, Caleb admitted. I was just too deaf to hear it. He took her hand, kissing the scar on her wrist where their blood had mixed. Come home, Isla. Not as the nanny, not as the maid. Come home as my partner. Let me spend the rest of my life making up for the years I missed. 6 months later, the Silver Creek Pack hosted a coronation. It wasn't for a king, but for a Luna. Isla stood on the balcony, wearing a gown of silver silk that covered the 4 circular scars on her back, her crown of scars, as Caleb called them. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was the most powerful woman in the North, and standing beside her, holding her hand with a grip that said he would never let go, was the Alpha King, who had finally learned that true strength wasn't about claws or fangs, it was about knowing who was worth dying for. And that is the story of the Silver Creek Massacre. It wasn't a story about a war between packs. It was a war for a soul. Isla Moore proved that rank means nothing in the face of courage. She took 4 arrows to save a legacy, but in doing so, she saved the Alpha himself. The medical records from that day are still sealed, but the pack archives tell us that Luna Isla went on to reform the Omega laws, ensuring no wolf was ever treated as invisible again. As for Caleb, they say he never let her walk on the snowy side of the street ever again. What do you think? Would you have forgiven Caleb for not noticing her for 3 years? Or was Isla right to hide her bond? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story moved you, please hit that like button, it really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Until next time, keep your pack close.